almost 90% of instructors also felt that using a hands-on lab kit gave students the opportunity to learn the knowledge and skills they needed to participate or to move on to further courses, whether that be for non-majors who didn't necessarily need to retain the skills, but were gaining research skills, or for our major students who are moving on and needing to replicate these skills in more advanced courses. And when it came down to the cost of the kit, 72% of students actually said that the cost of the kit was aligned with the value of the materials that they received. So taking a look here, does anyone want to share some of the challenges you faced in bringing labs online? I see in here some of the online labs were maybe a little bit clunky using digital labs. Anyone else have any feedback on challenges with bringing their labs online?
Well, I can say that we had a little bit of a problem with the change, and we actually changed the bookstores this year. And so that was a real challenge for us, and the logistics of not having a bookstore on campus was a big deal.
Oh,
And
wow.
it remains to be because we have, especially with the summer classes, because it's kind of short when you don't have enough time, and particularly in this economy, people don't may not know where they're going to have their kids' meal too. That could be a problem. So
Absolutely.
logistics with the new generation has been an issue for us delivering.
We also have some great feedback in here about, support for students and using technologies, especially maybe for non-traditional students who aren't as, may not be as familiar with the technology being used, as well as, students thinking they can speed through the labs and just knock them out real quick, and not really dedicating that time to doing the lab. So great feedback, everybody. Thank you
Thank
so much
you.
for sharing in the chat. So let's talk a little bit more about modality for the online lab courses. As a part of the survey, we wanted to understand how instructors preferred to teach their labs online. And we saw some really interesting data here, where all 84% of instructors preferred offering a hands-on lab experience. Many actually chose a virtual simulation-based lab experience for their students. And it really came down to cost and convenience why they did that. So when we asked the overall preference for teaching an online lab course, close to 80 to 90% of our instructors responded that either hands-on labs done at home or a mix of virtual and hands-on labs done at home was the right mix for their students, with only about 15% saying virtual simulations only were preferred. But when we pressed into why folks were choosing a virtual lab, cost, convenience, ease of implementation came up as factors, and even just requirements by the school to use a virtual option came up as being the reasons for choosing that virtual format. So Nate, why don't we head on to the next slide? And let's talk a little bit about Science Interactive. At Science Interactive, our goal is to bring a science laboratory experience to all students, no matter where they are. We do that through delivering our hands-on lab kits to students who are taking online labs only. We offer both hands-on and virtual labs that support a hybrid learning experience, really allowing students to take the lab with them anywhere. We also are working to enrich the on-campus lab experience. We launched this year our virtual pre-labs that can be incorporated into an on-campus lab, allowing students to better prep for that lab period on campus. We offer 13 Quality Matters certified disciplines, and we're excited. In the next month or so, we'll be launching a 14th, we hope, with our genetics discipline that's coming soon. And within these, we have over 450 hands-on and virtual labs across majors courses like anatomy and physiology and microbiology, to non-majors courses like forensics, and even incorporating some technical training with pharmacy technician. The labs work in the following manner. When we work with an instructor, we're going to work with you to identify labs that best align with your course learning outcomes and your syllabus. You can work with one of our scientists to select the best labs that align, and we'll design a custom kit that's going to best fit your course. Once you have access to the course, you are able to go in and customize the lessons and curriculum. You can add notes, change the questions, add your own questions, and set that course up really so that it's tailored to your students. On the student sides, when students enroll in the class, they're going to order their kits. And once they receive the kits, they're going to have step-by-step guidance through each of the labs with all of the data tables, the photograph uploads to show they're doing the work, and the data analysis right within the platform. In terms of the platform, instructors are able to assess their students' work, grade it, and it automatically is going to sync those grades to the learning management system. So thank you all for joining me. I am going to turn things over to Cynthia to talk about her course. And I'm really excited to learn more, Cynthia.
Well, again, thank you for having me. I was really excited to work with Nate last summer. We started working on putting together the kit and matching my syllabus. I was extremely concerned about the cost, and we worked on a great cost. I really liked the fact that part of it was simulation, and the interaction of the new grade book is absolutely wonderful. You know, as far as they have an opportunity to take a photograph and upload their work. So if they're having some problems in some areas, you can actually see it in their work and their experiments, because Science Interactive asks that you upload the photograph in some cases, in particular when we're talking about, for me, SLOs being plate tectonics. So they had an opportunity to work with the Play-Doh, and I could see what they were actually doing, as well as when they were doing mineral identification, as well as rock identification. They were able to go through the characteristics, or at least the skills needed in a classroom to identify minerals. So that in itself kind of captivated me, because one of our main concerns with individuals taking our class online, is that they didn't get that in classroom experience, that identifying, how do we identify minerals, how are we actually calculating, and those types of things. I mean, you can ask those questions, of course, in a regular format, but for a person who's looking to continue in science, it's great to have a kit in front of them. And another thing that I was extremely impressed with was I kind of wanted the family to be involved. If it was a family, even if it was a cat. Somebody said, well, I have to lock my cat out, before I get started. But it was just little things the package asked that I thought were kind of interesting. Well, what are you going to do to ensure safety? Well, I have a cat, but I'm going to go in the closet and I'm going to get this done. But I also thought that it would have the ripple effect in terms of spreading information on STEM. And in this case, I guess it's STEAM. But seeing mom, dad, or sister or brother working on a science experiment would, in my opinion, plant some type of a seed to try to get everybody back interested in science again. So I felt it very important for them to have a real world experience at being in a classroom, and of course the outreach experience in terms of seeing
I think she may have
about
frozen.
climate change and that kind of thing. And in one of the first labs that I had them do in my environmental class was to look at the simulation on climate change. And I thought that was really good in terms of showing them. And then, of course, they did an experiment to go along with that to see how condensation and CO2 interacts within the atmosphere. All of that's kind of been important, especially in this highly stimulated environment of lack thereof of science. So for them to be 10 labs, meeting the SLOs, actually going through the experiments and seeing how it works, and not only them, the whole family, they can, jump in on it and see that these are not just things that scientists are making up, that this is grounded with scientific evidence. The method is there. And so I don't know, Kate, is that what you asked me? I don't know. I went on a rant.
No, Cynthia, that was great. We appreciate that so much. And for everyone who's interested, we've got some photos of the minerals and the plate tectonics that Cynthia mentioned as well. But Cynthia, we really appreciate that feedback on the use of Science Interactive. Do you want to take a step back and maybe just talk high level kind of about your courses?
Well, as far as my courses online, the environmental geology was the most challenging, I thought, because I had previously used role playing, and I was concerned that because another thing that I was critical thinking is a big thing any of my students will tell you, because after working in industry, a lot of times when you're working in industry, things happen on the spot. One of the main examples that I use is when we had that BP spill, and they had to end up going back to the university to talk to their teachers. And that's because they were working under pressure. And one of the things that we did in the 80s and the 70s is I learned to work under pressure. Okay, here it is. Get busy. And I thought that, you know what? That's because a lot of our students are familiar with working in industry. So with me coming from an industry of engineering and environmental, I know that that's the way we work. And so for them to have that box forced them into a situation, and particularly in my environmental geology, where they have to go through and look at the environmental issues and then make a decision based on their findings. And I thought the box experiments really kind of brought that home in terms of grasping the critical thinking. How do I solve this? I have a problem. It's hot, or the water is contaminated, or it's highly porous and permeable. And I didn't want to just reproduce what I'd already done in physical geology 1403 or 1405. I tended to want to focus more in on the environmental issues and solving problems. And that's what we designed, actually. Well, Nate designed, helped me design out of his suite of experiments, is how can I get those people thinking, how would I solve a problem, or what would be a problem if we did fracking, or the porosity or the permeability of the strata was different. What are some things we can do? And certainly when we start looking at groundwater contamination and all of that, again, at the higher level of thinking is where we want to take our students to think critically, to use abstract thought in order to resolve some of our big issues, because from the very beginning, we have issues that start at the geologic level and make their way to the health level. I don't know if we see that, but a lot of people don't. We're not separate. We start at the geologic point. And from everything that we do, from what we produce, inevitably ends up in our healthcare system. I couldn't figure out why we were all together at Nash, but that's it. That we really are connected. And so it was very important that they actually, as a matter of fact, I love the boxes so much that they have a chance to think about that. What does that mean? And I was really surprised that they would even call me and tell me, hey, I think this is wrong, or this is right, and that would have never happened had we not had they not had it at home to test it, to look at it, to see how it actually works. And in the next couple of slides, I think you'll see. And then also I wanted to address and that goes along with those open-ended questions on why are we making the decisions? Why are we suggesting going electric? Why do we not want to use fossil fuels? Of course, I like fossil fuels, but why do we not want to use fossil fuels, and what is the impact? Again, the first lesson that I had to work on was on climate change. Even though it's the last chapter that I tackle on my syllabus, the climate change is, well, it's a newsmaker. It's that some people are saying no, it can't happen, But I noticed in Science Interactive, simulations that they do, it was beautifully illustrated, and some of the things that they could do, and then it would make them think. They started referring to it as climate change, not just, we have a chapter over but they really started thinking about some of the stuff. So
Thank you, Cynthia. And that was, I didn't even get the chance to ask about creating engagement, but thank you. That was all very wonderful, and it really appreciate kind of the different approaches you have for creating engagement in your online learning. Again, we talked about this in previous meetings, but you touched on a lot of these bullet points. Was there anything else you wanted to kind of touch on from this slide?
from this slide, I do want to mention the density calculation mass divided by volume here. They were going to measure the displacement of one of the things that the students said, and I never would have thought of it. Well, of course, I thought I was working in the labs, but when they messaged me, they said, I said, is there something that you want me to say today in the forum that we were having? And they said, yeah, I couldn't really see the graduated cylinder that well, but I was trying to measure the volume change, and I was thrilled. That was one of those moments that you notice your students are getting it, that they actually see, even though they were just doing a simple density displacement, it still was extremely encouraging for me that they were so into trying to make sure that they had the exact measurement, that I was thrilled, even though it may or may not have been correct. It was just good for them to say it, that I
Seeing
couldn't see it
engagement.
that good, it made a big deal.
Awesome. Thank you, Cynthia. So switching gears just a little bit, that was kind of focused on creating engagement. When we talk about strategies for success, like I mentioned, we had met previously, and these were kind of the topics we talked about. Do you mind just kind of expanding a little bit on these?
Well, as far as again, I hate to sound repetitive, rethinking what's possible, and specifically when we're dealing with, in this particular arena, with community college level situations, and sometimes even first generation college students. And that was very important. I wanted, and I think I kind of touched on it earlier when I started talking about, I wanted to infect the entire household.
Yeah.
And by that, I meant even if I didn't have a science major, a non-major in the house, if they saw mom, dad, sister, brother, or somebody identifying, going through oceanography or touching on plate tectonics or looking at volcanoes and earthquakes, while it may not recruit that individual, it may touch their kids or their mothers, decide, hey, I want to go back, and that looks interesting. And so that was one of the things that I was really concerned about, is again, trying to increase activity and enrollment in STEM across the board around the world, so that our students here in the United States can compete internationally when we start talking about science expectations. And that, I think the kit is sort of infectious. Whereas they might, that same individual might not have wanted to calculate density, but the child might have said, Mom, can I help you? Can I get you some water? And or something like that, or just stuck their heads in. Now, the other thing, as far as the transferability, we're always concerned about articulation agreements with the four-year universities. And then sometimes we run into problems with that because they say that the rigor is not there in terms of the lab. But I'd like to say that science interactive rigor, when you start talking about the rigor, is certainly there. As far as the students deciding, what, I think I might want to be a volcanologist. I looked at the data, the lab that you had out. What about earthquakes? I'm interested in seismology. And I think if you have a wide range of different experiments in your box tailored to your syllabus, then students tend to, well, you know what, I kind of like this. I kind of want to change over to the geosciences and some meteorology, oceanography. It's a number of different areas they could go into.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Cynthia. And so as Cynthia mentioned, we did just want to kind of highlight some of, those hands-on labs. So here's an actual submission from one of Cynthia's students, identifying the minerals. And what you can see on the right is essentially the access to the Science Interactive platform, where the students will review our Quality Matters certified curriculum. It'll walk them through the experimentation and how to record the findings and the evaluation piece as well. But just wanted to kind of share an example of what Cynthia is discussing. And then we also have an example of the plate tectonics as well, right?
Yes, that's a good one.
Awesome.
I
Well, Cynthia,
usually pull out the Play-Doh in class, but it was great having it at their house. Yes.
awesome. Well, Cynthia, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course. Any questions for Cynthia from anybody in the audience before we move on to Jennifer? All right.
I have a question. I am I'm a physicist, so we have the physics lab, and the problem that I encounter is that we have a lot of sensors that measure for you everything. For just a simple experiment, you want to determine the gravitational acceleration, right? So what you measure? The time that a falling object. And it's automatically, you put in the system, you do the lab in 5 minutes, and then the students start to ask questions. How do I write the report? What should I write in the report? So then I decided, okay, I realized that, the systems, the sensors, the platform you provided, it's a sensor. It's going through that. It give you the data dots, right? Even make the graph for you, the graphic for you, even fit the graph for you, and it's giving a number. And they don't have that feelings that you need to when you do the experiment. You do the experiment, you get the errors. How do you change? What would you change in order to minimize the errors? So the next things we do, I use a watcher, right? A timer. So in this way, they will understand how do you measure, what are the types of errors. So I was thinking that when you design the lab, I would really, really love to have the option to do the lab without those high-tech sensors and more hands-on with things, because sometimes, students will say, oh, I use this from my kitchen and I did this experiment, when I try to make, if it's an online class. So I say, okay, go in your house, find this, that, and do. For a pendulum, for example, I can take a bottle, but it's, different size with water, without water. So you see, that kind of things I'm looking for the online experiments, the setups.
Can I address that really quickly, Ms. Newman? One of the things that I didn't mention was the chat. The collaboration. We have D2L and Brightspace here, and one of the main things my students do immediately, even if I'm doing face-to-face, is set up a chat room on me. I call it on me, but so that they can talk about the different things that they can work on in terms of how they can resolve some of these problems. Now, I know you're talking about design problems with Science Interactive, but setting up a collaboration of chat, room activities, and that kind of thing, and would be a good thing for them to try to work that out together. That encourages teamwork. I just thought I'd throw that out. But
thank you. I'm trying. The only thing I have, there are a few students that are really interested in understanding, and a few students you are doing because it's a requirement, and they just do it and don't understand. So I was thinking if it's any way that we can team together, or exchange, make some constructive design new setups that will help. Yes, we have platform that everything gets simulated, you know, you just go and see the experiment, but that's watching. It's like you watch a movie. After a week, you don't remember the movie. So, and we don't want to do that. We need to help them not to understand only the subject, but use their creativity. And that's how I feel like it's a lot of work we need to do in online. It's
that's
just a thought, I'm sorry.
No, that's great. And one thing I'll jump in and chime in on is that when we design our physics experiments on our platform, you know, we really aim to give students a hands-on experience where they can generate that experimental error and they have to go through and analyze it and understand, you know, with physics, you know, small timing differences can make such a big difference in the results they get, and help them understand that thought process behind the physics, right? And so that's something we take into consideration, and why we really focus on the hands-on labs for physics is to give students that experience of just, you know, looking at gravity and getting that timer and accurate timing in there. So that's certainly something that we think about when we're designing our experiments.
Thank you.
I've got a question if you've got a second, and I hate to hijack the lecture here, but one of the problems I have with online courses especially is that when we moved everything to online after COVID, and what I see a lot from students in online courses is they treat them as a task-based thing. It's like a recipe from a cookbook. You do step A and then step B and then step C, and you put it in the oven, and 45 minutes later you get your A, right? And I struggle with that. I've had to redesign my homework assignments, you know, a lot, trying to avoid that task-based mentality. And I'm really afraid with labs, we end up with a task-based lab rather than a learning-based lab. How do you address that?
I want to address that because that was one of my main things, to be honest, Mr. Gardner, is that as a matter of fact, I wrote Nate on that all the time the last year. That's the reason why I got the box, is to stop that. Because once they get that box in front of them, sure, they can go through and work through it. And if they don't do it in a group, they're going to be collaborating. So you're encouraging teamwork. But at the same time, there are some questions that are in that kit that they have to know. It's not I'm going to copy off of you. Abstract thinking is absolutely necessary, and or critical thinking is necessary to answer some of the questions. And you can customize the questions inside Science Interactive. That's the main reason why I got it, is so we didn't have that I want an A, I'm taking it online and it comes off the top. And so that's the reason why I'm really kind of upset that our bookstore is not here, because I want to make sure that they don't have an excuse not to do the labs. And I can guarantee you that a Science Interactive box at home with an online will cut down on the, I'm going to hurry up and take this and I just knock it out and it's done. Because those questions, those open-ended questions in particular, are key to facilitating scientific discovery. And so I think that, you know, working in science labs, no experiments rarely work on the first go try anyway. I'm just saying that after 30, 40 years in science, in labs professionally. And so I want them, if they go through the kit and it doesn't work, then they're going to put something in there. And when they put it in there, I'm going to see where they're having a problem. And that gives me an opportunity to expand in my lecture online, or to refer them to a place in the book, or to do a role model. But I noticed that my lab grades balanced out a whole lot better by using a box where they actually had to do the experiment, actually better, worked out better than if they were face to face when they're all working together and copying off each other. I just because that's not happening when they have a box at home alone. They might call some other people, 2 or 3 other people, but they got to do the experiment.
Thank you.
I wanted to add to that because for our labs, I'm Karen Fortune. I taught online during COVID, of course, for so during a few semesters, maybe about 2 years worth. And what I did with our labs is we really just tried to create an environment very similar to what they would have experienced on campus.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that I did is number one, the labs were always synchronous. So I was always there when the students are performing the labs. Their cameras were always turned on. They had to be turned on, otherwise they would be marked absent. So their cameras had to be turned on. So I'm actually viewing them. And I went through, I gave them pre-lab lectures, things to be careful of, things to watch for, just as if they were in the lab. And then the other thing that I did is I created breakout rooms. And for the students who were comfortable, I had them choose maybe 2 partners. So there were 3 of them in a group, and I placed them in breakout rooms. And of course, I rotated in these breakout rooms. And when I rotated to these breakout rooms, I saw students having discussions like, oh, well, when I add this, I didn't get the color you got. What happened? What did I do wrong? And I saw students who would stop and say, well, did you do this? Oh, no, you used the wrong solution. You needed to do it. And they would communicate with each other. And I allowed them also, you can discuss the questions with each other. You still had, because there was a platform where they had to enter it themselves, they still had to write their own statements. But they discuss with each other and get understanding. So I really appreciated that. And those who were not comfortable going in groups by themselves, they stayed in the main room with me so that they can ask a question if they needed to. So those were some of the
Ms. Fortune. I agree 100%. That's what I was thinking. It really, they learn more actually by having the boxes than they would if they were in the classroom together, to be honest.
There were no secretaries when you had it online. In the lab, we always had somebody who's like, oh yeah, I'm taking notes. I'm the one who's going to take notes. And I always used to tell them, there are no secretaries. I need you to get up and do that. But with the online labs and having the hands-on kit, well, we all have to do it.
That's right. That's exactly right. That's what I like. Thank you so much. That's what I meant.
Yeah, thank you, Carla, for that. And Nathan, thank you for the question as well. Jennifer, you want to give a just kind of high level overview about the courses you teach?
Sure. Okay. So I'm a biology professor, and I teach majors and non-majors, and I teach primarily introductory biology. So unlike Professor Gardner, I am not necessarily trying to get them to be super creative and come up with their own experiments and begin to do real research. I'm at that first level where my goal is for them to learn how to actually accomplish a task. They can't follow instructions. They don't know how to read a procedure and go step, 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 step. And so that's my job. In intro biology is the kit and the procedure and the forced nature of a bag full of chemicals that they have to measure and pipette and, use their graduated cylinders and actually accomplish things, teaches them how to do a task-based procedure on their own. And then hopefully as they go up in level and they go to their second year courses and their third year courses, someone will teach them the creative, critical thinking, developing and designing experimentation aspects of science that I really hope that they gain once they leave my doors. But my job is, can they even follow a procedure at all, right? And so because of that, using hands-on lab kits was super, super important to me. I got my start with online teaching back in 2010 to 2011 when I designed a course with a group of other instructional designers and sort of a faculty supervisory committee, because we were trying to design something that a lot of faculty might choose to use. And so that hands-on element was really important to me. We wanted a mix with some virtual, but it was important that it be at least 2/3 hands-on. And so for mitosis and meiosis, for example, I went ahead and dug out my kit because a couple
saw that.
done hands-on experiments. So I thought, well, I'll just show you one of mine. And so like this is a bag full of chromosomes, and they're just the standard bead kind with the magnetic centromere. Those of you who teach biology immediately knew what I was talking about. I'll open it up while I'm talking. And we make them walk themselves through mitosis and meiosis. And it would be really easy to say, you can just do that as a simulation, right? It's lining up chromosomes, it's separating them. But what I liked about eScience at the time, that's now Science Interactive, is that they agreed with me that having students take an actual chromosome and slide it around on a piece of paper and take pictures as they do it made a huge difference in their understanding and in their memory about the process and why it does that. It also helps them see what we mean by lining up and pairing the chromosomes and pulling them apart. And so that was what was really important to me. And that's how I ended up here with eScience and what became Science Interactive and using their kits for over a decade now. So, you know, that's kind of my intro to how I got here.
Yeah.
And I do.
Awesome. Thank you, Jennifer. Definitely appreciate that intro. I saw you reach a couple minutes ago for your kit, so I'm glad you pulled that. I've got an A&P one here, but I think we'll spare everybody from opening that one up. So appreciate it. That was a great segue from that intro slide into creating engagement. You know, you touched on finding the right mix of virtual and hands-on. Do you want to talk a little bit more about, you know, how you're creating that engagement with, I guess specifically those bonus codes? I think this is a wonderful idea that everybody can kind of take something away from.
Sure. Yeah. So the most important thing in choosing your labs is making sure that it's a comparable experience to what the students would have in their face-to-face labs as much as you can. And so I chose labs that were at least 2/3 hands-on. But as those of you who teach biology know, the microscope is absurdly expensive and students can't have a quality microscope in their home. Oh, someone asked for a picture of what the kit looks like. Nate, can you post a couple pictures from your set, maybe?
Yeah, I can try to figure out if anybody can still see me. I have a small one right here. But yeah, Carrie, I can send some pictures over to you.
Yeah. And mine is open, so I'll angle it while I'm talking too when I show you some stuff later on. I forgot what I was saying. Oh, okay. So we chose these labs. And so because the microscope is so expensive, we did use the V-scope, which I think Science Interactive has done a really good job of forcing students to learn the important parts of the microscope and understand what each part does and to be forced to kind of work through it. So it won't let them skip a step. It won't let them, you know, just ram the stage up and into the objective lens and things like that, which I think teaches them a little bit. And we were really gratified during the pandemic to discover that our students post-pandemic, when they finally came back to campus, really did actually learn a little bit about how to use a microscope so that they regained the skills in their second year and third year classes a little bit better than we thought they might. We were worried that they wouldn't have any skills at all. And really they came back about the same as our face-to-face classes. And that's just a qualitative observation. We didn't do any math on it, but most of our professors who teach second and third year classes said, you know, that virtual thing actually really did work. They seemed to understand what they were looking for. They knew the parts. They knew, you know, I have to do this before I can do this. So that was really good. And then to get students more engaged as they're doing these labs, usually the hands-on lab really kind of engages them on its own. I mean, they're pulling out chemicals, they're measuring things, they get to see color changes, they get to use a little flame and a cute little setup to keep them safe and all of that. So they're pretty engaged as it is, but to get them engaged in the learning portion of it, one of the things that I do is I hide a bonus code in when I'm giving them grading feedback and I'm telling them, oh, you did a great job here, but you might have forgotten to add this, or it looks like you maybe didn't heat your samples high enough, things like that. Early on in the semester, to get them reading that feedback, I hide a bonus code in there, and then I'd send them announcement after announcement for like a 2-week span, letting them know, hey, there's a bonus code. You just have to go read my feedback to find it. And that gets them to figure out how to find the feedback, because if your students are as technologically challenged as mine are, they don't look for things that are hard to find. If it's not the first click, they're done. So by hiding that bonus code in there so that they know they have to do 2 or 3 clicks to get to this feedback, they'll figure out how to get there, and then they're more likely to do it. So that's one of the things I do. And I'm doing that right now. So I just sent my second reminder. I only have 3 students who have found the feedback so far. I was really excited because one found it in only 24 hours. So I was like, oh, this is going to be a great group. But no, 3 is all I've gotten so far. But I do expect to get the other. I only have 14 students this summer, which is really nice. I love having only 14 students. But I'm expecting another, 8 or 9 to find the bonus code before my June 30th cutoff. So I'll keep reminding them. It's going to be fun.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jennifer. So I guess switching gears, that is creating engagement. Do you want to talk about, again, we met previously, we talked about your personal strategies for success. Do you want to talk a little bit more about these bullet points here?
Sure. I do see a quick question in the chat that I want to respond to. We do have some chemistry professors at Dallas College. I don't think they're currently using Science Interactive. They had been using what was eScience, but when we transitioned, because of the pandemic, they had some changes. But they are talking with Nate now about Science Interactive.
We've got,
if you want to get them in touch.
Yeah, I can definitely do that. Esther, I'll follow up with an email letting you know who at Dallas College in the chemistry department is going to be using Science Interactive in the fall. Thank you, Jennifer.
Okay, so in terms of ensuring student success, it's really helpful if you can map your assignments to your student outcomes and map them to your face-to-face campus labs as well, so that you can keep your lecture going so that it lines up properly. And then, you know, connecting that why. And for us at Dallas College, one of our big pushes lately has been a marketable skills push. So, you know, we're trying to teach students teamwork and quantitative reasoning and critical thinking and the ability to communicate in written and oral and visual formats, all of those core outcome skills that in Texas we have to teach all of our students in all of our classes that are core. We have been making a big push to help students see the value in that. And we call it sort of this marketable skills push, where basically all we do is we say, hey, you know, that teamwork we're trying to teach you. This is why we're teaching it to you. Employers want you to be able to work in a team. They want to be able to say, hey, Joe, go do this project with, you know, Jane in the marketing department because we need to get it done. And we want students to be able to do that. And so we talk to them about it from a, this will help you in your career standpoint, and then we try to tie it in. And so for the labs, to help the students want to be successful, because I teach a lot of non-science major students, I try to talk to them about, you know what, sometimes you're going to get a project and it's going to have a protocol and you're going to have to go out there and figure out how to follow that protocol. Just because this is science doesn't mean that protocol concept isn't going to come up in your future jobs. And so the ability to go to a website, read a procedure, follow that procedure, and come up with a product at the end is a natural skill that every employer wants, you know, future employees to have. And so talking about it from that perspective and helping them get the wording right so that when they put on their resume things that they've done, they can tie in the things that they've done in my non-science majors lab class. And I do that for my face-to-face students as well. And so it's a really nice tie-in. If the labs are similar, it's easy for me to make those same kinds of tie-ins. I've done the work already of mapping it. And then quality and rigor, of course, you want them to really feel how science works. You want them to work with chemicals. You want them to learn how to measure in a graduated cylinder properly. And you want them to be safe with their goggles and their gloves and all of those things that come with the kit. So I think that's really, really helpful as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jennifer. And I mean, just tying back to kind of one of the points you made, right? Thank you for providing the student feedback that we can share with everybody. And, you know, it's, again, you know, just seeing this from a non-major is, I think incredible. And I know Kate has done a lot of work over the past, you know, 10 years, and I think she loves seeing stuff like this. So from Science Interactive, you know, this is why we do what we do, right? And then also to your point, you know, a non-major there with his gloves on at the following the safety protocols. But again, so this is submitted work within Jennifer's course. This is our biological macromolecules lesson. Jennifer, anything you want to say about these photos?
Sure. So I'm not sure how many of you all teach biology, but this is the classic biomolecules set of experiments. The students get in their kit test tubes. They're itty bitty, they're cute, and they get a test tube rack. The student didn't really need to hand hold those. They could have put them in the rack, but they get Benedict's reagent and they add it to a bunch of different foods in little bottles, as well as some household foods. They mash up some potato and some onion, things like that. And then they heat them and they see the colors change. What's shown on the left here, that one is the starch test with IKI. It turns blue-black if there's starch present, and it doesn't. And they do a little bit of solid, so that's why there's a spoon down there. And so they really do the same experiments, the hands-on things that the students do face-to-face. And I think someone mentioned really early on in the chat that they feel like their students aren't as engaged when they do an online lab. And I do think that's true for some students. They're really kind of phoning it in, right? You get the picture where you can tell they didn't bother to heat their samples because they're all still blue, things like that. So it's not that that doesn't happen, but in my experience, when I teach face-to-face, I'll have a group of 4 and 1 or 2 of those 4 students are fully engaged. They're paying attention. They're asking me questions. They're doing the lab, and 1 or 2 of them are just sitting there. Sometimes they're on their phones and you have to constantly tell them to put their phone away and join the group. And so I think what we're seeing in the online lab is that those students who are on their phone and you're having to constantly get them involved, those are the ones who look like they didn't take this seriously and they didn't bother, or they didn't upload their photos or things like that. I think we're just seeing them not get the points because they don't have the rest of their group to pull them up. And so that's the hardest part at the engagement level, is trying to get those 2 students who used to rely on the best students to pull them up to also participate. And that's where I focus a lot of my efforts, because my top students do this. They're excited. They love it. They write comments like it felt like a true experiment. They get really excited about it. So I don't need to engage them as much. I just need to provide them good feedback. But for the students who are less engaged, the ones who are going to float along with their friends, helping them along, we have to find a way to make it interesting and exciting for them. And so Nate switched us to, this one's the photosynthesis experiment. They get to, they use a quarter and they roll it along and they separate their pigments. And it works really well for some students and it works horribly for other students. So this is a great one to have the students collaborate with each other, share their data in a discussion forum, post your picture of your pigment separation. And I encourage them to not all get spinach. The procedure tells them to use the spinach leaf. And I tell them any dark green leaf will work great. Go find one in your garden. If you've got one that's purple, use a purple leaf, whatever you've got. And then when they post it in the forum and they share their pictures with each other, they're like, oh, you have different colors. Look, mine has a bunch of yellow and yours doesn't have any. And so it's a really, really fun thing for them to do. And it gives them that experience of a little bit of discovery, because again, intro level, I'm really mostly focusing on, can they do a task, right? Can they follow a procedure? But I do like a little discovery and a little bit of excitement as well. And so this gives me that opportunity to kind of mix them.
Thank you, Jennifer. Well, we are right at time, everyone. Appreciate you all joining today. I do, Cynthia, Jennifer, if it's okay, maybe 5 more minutes, if anybody has any questions that we can, help answer.
So I see someone asking about second semester. I'm going to let Kate answer that because I tend not to teach the second semester. I like the chemistry, but I know they have them, so I'll let her talk.
We do have second semester biology labs. We have your plant labs, plant transpiration, plant reproduction. We do a lab on mosses, fungi, prokaryotes, up into some of the ecology labs, food webs, ecological interactions, as well as vertebrates, invertebrates with dissection. So we have the perch, the clam, the grasshopper, the earthworm. There's like 2 more that are not popping into my mind immediately, but whole host of different dissections. The grasshopper, I don't know if I mentioned that one, but whole host of dissections in there. A number of hands-on opportunities. Students have the opportunity to grow some prokaryotes at home, swab their desks and dissect mushrooms. So all sorts of activities in that second semester biology lab.
Awesome, thanks, Kate. And Carrie, thank you for the being intrigued. If you're interested, as you can see here, there's a QR code. I also have my email address. PowerPoint and I have been in a huge fight all day. Please don't do .com. It's just mdavis@scienceinteractive.com. But if you'd like to schedule some time, I'm happy to review all of the different lessons we have to offer. But any other questions, y'all?
I did want to throw something else out there. I've seen a couple of people talk about fights with their bookstore and difficulties. So I wanted to mention the solution that we had, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So one of the things that we used to do is we used to stock the kits. And it was a difficulty with the bookstore because they never knew exactly how many they needed. And so sometimes they'd have overstock and they would let the kits sit in their warehouse getting hot and old, and it was no fun. And so we switched this past year. We started last fall and it's been going really well to a system where the students receive a redemption code instead. And then they redeem it through the Science Interactive online platform. And they're getting their kits really fast. They're redeeming on like Wednesday or Thursday of 1 week, and they're getting them by, Wednesday of the following week. So it's a nice fast process. Maybe not for a Maymester, but for even a summer session, it's perfectly fine. And what we're actually delivering the codes through what we use. So we use Follett at our bookstore, which means that we use Red Shelf Brightwave, which is their online ebook system. And they basically embedded the codes in the online ebooks so that the students would get their code delivered when they purchase their book, which we use an inclusive tuition program, so they get it automatically. And they're able to redeem it straight through all inside of eCampus. So they don't have to get an email that's separate. They don't have to go to the bookstore and pick anything up. And it's working pretty well. So if your college uses a bookstore that wants to find a digital delivery system, maybe they can work with Science Interactive to figure out a way to deliver those access codes digitally, because that worked really well for us. So
Thank you, Jennifer. I need it.
Yeah. Thank you, Jennifer. All right, final call. Any last questions? Okay. Well, first off, Jennifer, Cynthia, thank you so much. This has been an awesome session. Everybody else, thank you so much for the engagement. Thank you for joining today. Don't forget those Grubhub vouchers. Lunch is on us today. Otherwise, again, thank you all for joining, and have a great rest of your afternoon.